In the heart of a winter that arrived too early and too cold, a loyal German shepherd walked through an airport as if he could hear a secret no one else could. Travelers rushed past, thinking only about flights and schedules, never imagining that a quiet danger was hiding in the breath of a woman who believed she was perfectly fine. But Aspen the canine slowed, lifted his head, and gave a single deep bark that would change the course of two lives before the snow outside even had time to settle. What did he sense that no human could see? What silent warning was whispering through the cold air that morning? If you are watching right now, tell me where you are watching from, and let me take you into a story where instinct becomes a miracle, and winter itself seems to lean in to listen. Winter in Willow Harbor never arrived politely. It came like an untamed storyteller, sweeping across the coastline with icy breath and a restless hunger for movement. That morning, the first storm of the season unfurled earlier than anyone predicted, painting the runways in a restless churn of white. The sky hung low, bruised with steel-blue clouds, and the wind moved through the airport structures like an old spirit tracing familiar paths. Willow Harbor itself was a small northwestern city, graceful but stubborn, caught between forested cliffs and the frigid line of the ocean. Locals always said the town was born from mist and shaped by salt, a place where winters carve people into their truest selves. Inside the airport, heaters hummed but could not entirely ward off the cold, leaving the air tinged with a faint mix of metal, melting snow, and human breath. The holiday crowds shuffled through security lines, bundled in layers like migrating creatures preparing for a long journey. Amid this busy winter corridor walked Mason Hale, a 35-year-old K-9 officer whose presence carried a quiet steadiness. Mason was tall, broad-shouldered without being imposing, the type of man whose strength lived more in his patience than in his muscles. His brown hair was trimmed neatly for regulation, though it always held a slight wave that cold air made more unruly. His hazel eyes carried a warmth that contrasted sharply with the wind outside, the eyes of a man who had seen difficult days but had never let the world harden him completely. Years ago, a difficult rescue mission, one that ended with the loss of a partner in the mountains, had carved a gentleness into Mason's nature. Some people broke after grief. Mason softened instead, learning to pay closer attention to the subtle things most would miss. And beside him padded Aspen, the German shepherd, who was almost mythic in her own right. Aspen was 4 years old, with a thick coat mottled in ash gray and charcoal, giving her the appearance of a creature carved from winter itself. Her dark amber eyes were intelligent, steady, and old in a way that made children trust her instantly. Aspen carried herself with a confidence that was neither aggressive nor timid. It was the certainty of a being who knew her purpose in the world. She had been trained from puppyhood, excelling not only at detection, but at reading subtle physiological cues, changes in breath, heart rate, hormones, the silent signatures of invisible trouble. Today, however, Aspen moved with unusual intensity. She sniffed the air sharply, nose quivering at the strange cocktail of humidity from melting snow and the dense cluster of people seeking warmth. She was more alert than usual, glancing in every direction as though winter had delivered a new message only she could decipher. Mason noticed. He always noticed. "Easy, girl," he murmured under his breath, fingers brushing lightly over her harness. There was no worry in his voice, only acknowledgement. Weather shifts often heightened Aspen's senses. Cold made sense sharper, clearer, like notes in a song separated by silence. They continued their patrol through the concourse, boots tapping against the polished floor. Families hurried past them. Elderly couples clung to each other for warmth. A teenage boy sneezed into a scarf that had seen far better days. Mason lifted a brow at that, and Aspen huffed, a soft canine judgment that made him grin for a moment. Near one of the large observation windows, a woman paused to adjust her luggage. She was tall, slender, wrapped in a burgundy coat dusted with melting snowflakes. Her hair, dark chestnut and loosely curled, rested against her shoulders like a handful of winter branches. Though she was striking, what caught Aspen's attention was not her appearance, but something beneath it, something woven into the scent that brushed faintly through the cold air. This woman was Evelyn Ward, 31 years old, a graphic designer from Portland traveling for a family visit before the roads iced over completely. Evelyn was the kind of person whose kindness was instinctual. She smiled at strangers, greeted service workers warmly, and still sent holiday cards to the kindergarten teacher who once encouraged her to draw. Yet beneath her softness was a quiet resilience shaped by a childhood that taught her how unpredictable life could be. Losing her mother early had forced her to become her own source of strength. That history made her gentle, not fragile. Today, however, Evelyn was tired. The pregnancy, her first, had been progressing smoothly until the last week, when unfamiliar cramps and sudden fatigue began creeping in. She brushed it off as normal, unwilling to worry her husband or delay her trip. But every so often, as she trudged through the cold, a sharp flutter tightened around her abdomen, followed by a breath that didn't feel quite full. She told herself it was the winter chill. Nothing more. Aspen suddenly stiffened, not dramatically, just enough to signal that something in the air had shifted from background noise to meaningful information. Her ears lifted, her nose angled forward, and her body took on that poised stillness she only adopted when decoding something important. Mason's steps slowed. "What is it?" he whispered, though he already knew the answer was not one she could give in words. Aspen took 2 deliberate steps toward Evelyn. Not a lunge, not a pull, just a controlled lean of her body, the canine equivalent of pointing without raising a paw. Passengers glanced over curiously as the dog paused, her muscles taut beneath her winter-thick coat. Mason tightened his grip on the leash out of habit, maintaining protocol even as his instincts told him Aspen wasn't responding to threat. She released a soft, low bark, deep, rhythmic, unmistakably different from her alert for narcotics or explosives. No. This one was the sound Mason had heard only in medical-related interventions, the vocalization Aspen used when detecting hormonal irregularities, blood pressure inconsistencies, or sudden physiological distress. It was a bark that lived somewhere between instinct and training, ancient as the wolf and precise as a medical instrument. "Aspen," Mason said firmly but gently, moving to her side. She did not break focus. Evelyn blinked, surprised, instinctively placing a hand on her belly as though the gesture might answer a question she didn't fully understand. Mason approached slowly, leaving a respectful buffer of space as regulations required. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Officer Mason Hale. My partner is alerting to something. Are you feeling all right?" Evelyn looked down at the dog, then back at Mason. There was no fear in her expression, only confusion touched with embarrassment. I think I'm fine," she said softly. "I mean, I've been a little dizzy this morning, and it's cold. Maybe that's all." Aspen's gaze did not waver. The crowd around them parted naturally, like a tide adjusting to a stone. Winter hummed faintly against the glass windows, and for a brief moment the busy airport felt suspended, as though every breath waited for the next chapter to unfold. Evelyn inhaled, slow, unsteady, and Mason saw it. The small falter, the subtle tightening of her shoulders. Signs he had learned to read, not from textbooks, but from years spent watching people cross the thin line between fine and not fine at all. Aspen stepped closer and sat. A deliberate, trained signal. She wasn't warning of danger. She was calling attention to a human body whispering for help before the person holding it realized what was happening. And winter, drifting quietly outside, seemed to lean its ear toward them, waiting. The winter wind pressed its palms against the airport windows as if trying to peer inside, curious about the moment unfolding between dog, officer, and expectant mother. The crowds quieted in that subtle way humans do when they sense an invisible thread tugging reality into a different direction. Mason Hale took a breath, steady and measured, watching Aspen's body language with the focus of someone who had learned to trust the smallest signs. Aspen, carved from gray winter and instinct, remained perfectly still, ears forward, weight balanced, gaze fixed on Evelyn Ward. She was not tense nor afraid. She was committed, listening, announcing something only she could perceive. Evelyn blinked twice, unsure whether to laugh politely or worry. She placed a protective hand beneath her ribs, tracing a line down her side as though searching for clarity. "I'm sure it's just the cold," she murmured, but her voice carried a fragile tremor, thin as frost on a window, the kind you could wipe away with a single breath. Mason's training clicked through his mind like steady gears turning. He stepped slightly closer, still keeping that respectful space between them, a gesture he had practiced countless times, but performed now with a gentler kind of urgency. Sometimes, Mason said quietly, Aspen detects changes people don't notice yet. Things like low blood pressure, drops in oxygen levels, little shifts. He gave Evelyn a reassuring half smile. She's usually right. Evelyn exhaled slowly, and her shoulders lifted with the effort. Around them, passengers watched with curiosity, but not fear. Even children seemed instinctively calm, drawn in by Aspen's controlled energy. A toddler pointed at the German shepherd and whispered something to his mother, something about a winter wolf, and the mother nodded, because Aspen did look like a creature from the realm of snow and stories. As Evelyn shifted her weight, a new character stepped into the scene, Sarah Wexley, a middle-aged flight attendant known in Willow Harbor's small aviation community for her practical kindness and borderline obsessive sense of duty. Sarah was of average height, but carried herself taller, with short sandy blonde hair tucked behind one ear and glasses dangling from a blue lanyard decorated with tiny airplane charms. Years of turbulent flights and long-haul schedules had carved fine lines around her eyes, but they were lines of laughter, not bitterness. She'd seen people break down in fear at 30,000 feet, seen families reunite in joy or despair, and these experiences had made her patient to a degree that sometimes felt saintly. When Sarah noticed Evelyn leaning slightly against her luggage for support, she moved closer with the instinct of someone who had spent her life watching over strangers. "Honey," she said gently, "you don't look so good. Why don't you sit? I can get water or—" "I'm okay," Evelyn insisted, though she didn't sound convinced. Really, just a little lightheaded. Aspen issued a low, deliberate chuff of air, almost like she disagreed. Sarah raised her eyebrows. "Well, dogs don't lie," she said softly, "especially ones like her." She had seen medical alert dogs before during flights. Aspen's behavior was not new to her, and that alone made the moment feel more grounded. Mason nodded once. "Ma'am, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Just protocol." Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." And so the quiet inquiry began. It was ordinary, procedural, and yet laced with the subtle weight of winter destiny. "When did the dizziness start?" Mason asked. "This morning," Evelyn replied, rubbing her fingers together, as if trying to coax warmth back into them. "The cold made it worse. I thought it was just fatigue. Any chest pain, shortness of breath, vision changes?" "Not exactly, just a little pressure. And sometimes it feels like the world tilts for a second." She tried to smile apologetically, but the smile didn't hold. Her lips trembled, not from fear, but from the effort of appearing composed. Aspen angled her head, nose subtly twitching. Mason recognized that movement. Aspen was following a scent pattern, tracing hormonal signatures like a delicate map. He could almost feel her thoughts vibrating through the leash. More passengers gathered now, forming a loose semicircle at a respectful distance. Not intruding, just concerned. Winter made people more tender, perhaps because harsh weather reminded them how fragile life was. A man with salt and pepper hair, Richard Callan, a retired school principal who carried himself with the gentle authority of someone used to guiding children, stepped slightly forward. "Do you need help getting somewhere?" he asked Evelyn. He wasn't pushy, just concerned, his deep voice carrying a calming resonance. Richard was in town visiting his granddaughter, and the sense of responsibility still clung to him, like the smell of chalk in an old classroom. Evelyn shook her head, but wavered slightly in the movement, and that was all Aspen needed. She barked again, not loudly, not sharply, but with intention. 3 pulses of sound spaced apart like careful brush strokes. A medical alert signal, a pattern Mason had been trained to interpret. He moved instantly. "Evelyn, I'm going to call the airport medical team. It's just a precaution." Evelyn protested weakly. "I'm sure it's nothing." But Sarah touched her arm, firm yet kind. "Sweetheart, if a dog this trained says it's something, then we listen. Let them take a look. Better to be safe than sorry." Richard nodded, supporting the idea. Winter hummed behind him as snow tapped lightly against the glass. Mason clicked his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hale. We have a potential medical situation in Concourse B. Adult female, approximately 31, pregnant, reporting dizziness and visible instability. K9 is giving medical alert indicators, requesting medical personnel." The reply crackled through, swift and professional. Evelyn sank slowly onto a nearby bench with Sarah's help. Her breath came a little shallower now, the edges of the world blurring like frost drifting across a window pane. She touched her belly again, a subconscious gesture of protection. "I didn't think it was serious," she whispered. "Sometimes the body whispers before it shouts," Sarah murmured back. Aspen settled in front of Evelyn, not touching, but close enough for her warmth to be felt. Her amber eyes softened, her ears relaxed, but her posture remained vigilant, as though she was guarding both Evelyn and the small life she carried. A faint smile touched Evelyn's lips. "She's beautiful." Mason smiled too. "She thinks the same about you." When the medical team arrived, a young EMT named Jordan Clark, with sharp features softened by empathy, and a senior nurse named Marisol Green, a veteran in emergency medicine. They worked with calm efficiency. Jordan, tall and lean, with snow still clinging to his boots, carried a portable monitor. Marisol, slightly shorter with silver-streaked hair tied back tightly, radiated competence. She had spent 30 winters in emergency rooms and believed that weather influenced people's hearts just as much as their moods. Both introduced themselves warmly before asking Evelyn a series of questions. They checked her pulse, her pressure, her oxygen levels. Jordan frowned, subtle but there. "BP is low," he said quietly to Mason. Marisol gestured gently. "Evelyn, I'd like you to come with us to the on-site medical room so we can stabilize you. It's just next door." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Okay, yes, I can walk." "You can?" Marisol confirmed. "But we'll stay close." As they guided her toward the medical room, Aspen rose instantly, ready to follow. Mason gave the hand signal to stay, and Aspen obeyed, but reluctantly. Her ears pinned forward, her weight shifted, every instinct pulling her toward Evelyn. The winter storm outside exhaled softly, chilling the windows as they passed. People stepped aside, watching them move through the concourse like a small procession, carrying something fragile and important. Evelyn glanced back at Aspen, whispering, "Thank you, whatever you sensed. Thank you." Aspen's tail gave a single, low wag. Nothing exuberant, only acknowledgement. Mason watched the door close behind Evelyn and the medical team. He knelt beside Aspen, brushing a hand over her ears. "Good girl," he said softly. "You heard something the rest of us couldn't." Aspen leaned into his touch, then turned her amber gaze toward the door again, still listening, still attuned, as if winter itself were whispering through the cracks, urging her to stay vigilant. And the airport returned to motion, unaware that a single dog's instincts had just nudged the course of someone's life. The door to the medical wing closed behind Evelyn and the attending staff, leaving the airport concourse slowly reawakening from its momentary hush. People resumed their paths, boarding announcements echoed faintly overhead. Luggage wheels hummed across the polished floors, and distant conversations revived the rhythm of travel. Yet, beneath that surface hum, lived a lingering tremor, a subtle thread of unease that only Aspen seemed able to trace. Mason stood beside her, his breath forming a thin cloud as the cold draft slipped through the corridor. Aspen's stance had softened, but not completely. She remained anchored near the door, ears pricked and eyes steady. She was no longer issuing warnings, but she watched that door the way a lighthouse watches the sea, not out of fear, but duty. Within the medical room, Evelyn settled onto a cushioned bench with Jordan, the EMT, adjusting a blood pressure cuff around her arm. Marisol prepared a small tray of supplies. Their movements were practiced, precise, devoid of panic. To them, unpredictable winters and sudden medical mysteries were threads woven into long years of experience. Jordan glanced at the monitor as it flickered to life. "Let's keep checking every few minutes," he murmured to Marisol. "If her pressure dips any lower, we'll stabilize her," Marisol finished, already predicting the direction of his thought. She had a voice that reminded people of warm blankets and grave truths, spoken gently. Evelyn watched them work, her breathing shallow. Though she tried to appear composed, a faint tremor in her hands betrayed the truth. She was scared, not of the people, not of the machines, but of the uncertainty curling through her body. She felt as though something inside her shifted out of place. Not painful, not sharp, but wrong in the quiet way that storms begin with a single gust. "I really didn't think anything was wrong," she whispered to herself. Marisol, hearing her, stepped closer. Most expectant mothers don't. That's no fault of yours. She sat beside her, offering a gentle smile. Sometimes our bodies send signals that feel like nothing until suddenly they're everything. Outside, Mason shifted his weight, glancing down at Aspen. He had been through hundreds of patrol hours with her, trainings, simulations, emergency calls, but her behavior today carried a seriousness he couldn't quite explain. She wasn't restless, she was purposeful, as if some part of winter itself had whispered a secret into her fur. A nearby janitor, Liam Reyes, paused his cart as he passed. Liam was a young man with kind eyes, curly dark hair, and the sort of gentle presence that animals often trusted instantly. He had an easygoing nature shaped by years of caring for his grandmother, who raised him alone after his parents' passing. Responsibility had aged him quietly, giving him a perspective deeper than his 23 years. "Is she okay?" Liam asked, gesturing toward the closed door. "She didn't look so good earlier." Mason nodded slightly. "They're checking her out now. Aspen thinks something's off." Liam whistled softly. "That dog knows things, man. I swear she looks right into people's souls." Aspen, overhearing, flicked an ear in modest acknowledgement. Liam chuckled and pushed his cart gently onward, leaving Mason in the echo of soft wheels. Minutes turned slowly. Snow outside drifted in hesitant sheets, like winter pacing in thought. Aspen stood again, leaning slightly toward the door as muffled footsteps whispered behind it. Inside, Marisol listened with a stethoscope pressed to Evelyn's chest. Her brow furrowed, but she kept her voice calm. "Your heart sounds fine, but your blood pressure isn't rising as quickly as I'd like." Evelyn's lips pressed together. "Is my baby okay?" Jordan exchanged a quick glance with Marisol. "You're stable for now," he said gently, "but we want to move you to the larger medical suite where we can run a Doppler scan. It helps us see blood flow, circulation, just to make sure everything's all right." "I don't want to overreact," Evelyn whispered, but the uncertainty in her voice betrayed the depth of her fear. "You're not overreacting," Marisol said, squeezing her hand. "You're being responsible. Let us take care of you." As they prepared the small transport chair, something inside Evelyn shifted again. A wave, brief but dizzying, washing her vision in a thin white haze. She inhaled quickly, gripping the seat. "There," she whispered, "it's happening again." Jordan moved instantly, steadying her. Marisol checked the monitor as the numbers dipped just slightly, subtle but undeniable. "Okay," Marisol said, voice firm now. "We're moving her. Mason will want to know." Back in the concourse, the door opened, and Jordan stepped out for a moment. Aspen surged forward, not anxiously, but with the precision of an arrow released from a bow. Jordan smiled faintly at her. "She's alert today," he said. Mason nodded. "More than usual." "She's good," Jordan replied gently. "Her instincts are helping us out. We're moving Ms. Ward to the main suite. She had another dizzy spell." Mason exhaled slowly. "Do you need assistance?" "We've got her," Jordan assured him. "But if she's okay with it, we might let Aspen stay near the door of the next room. She seems to calm her." It was not typical protocol, but Aspen wasn't a typical K9. The winter storm pressed softly against the windows, as though urging them forward. Mason nodded, and Aspen pressed her nose briefly against his hand, seeking silent permission. He granted it with a touch. "Let's go." They followed Jordan to the larger medical room. The hallway was colder here, lit by soft overhead lamps humming quietly. Aspen padded ahead, still under control, but undeniably drawn to Evelyn like a compass locked onto true north. Inside, Evelyn was being settled onto a wider bed, her eyes fluttering between exhaustion and worry. She managed a faint laugh when she saw Aspen peering through the open doorway. "You again," she whispered, her voice thin. "You don't give up, do you?" If dogs could smile, Aspen did. She rested her chin just inside the threshold, tail wagging once, slow, warm, reassuring. Marisol began the Doppler scan. A cool gel spread across Evelyn's abdomen, and the machine flickered with shifting patterns. The hum of the device blended with the faint whisper of winter swirling beyond the walls. After several minutes of slow, focused adjustments, Marisol's expression changed. She was careful. She masked it well, but a small gravity settled behind her eyes. Jordan noticed too. "What is it?" he asked softly. Marisol focused on the waveform. Reduce blood flow. Lower than it should be. Evelyn froze. Is my baby... Your baby is alive, Marisol said immediately, firmly. But something is affecting circulation. We need to call the hospital and arrange transfer. The sooner the better. Evelyn's eyes welled. I should have gone to the doctor earlier. Hey, Jordan said softly. You came now. That matters. You listened. Well, someone listened for you. He nodded toward the dog in the doorway. Evelyn turned her gaze toward Aspen, her lip trembling. How did you know? Aspen held her gaze steadily, like a quiet winter guardian who had stepped out of myth to change the shape of a day. Mason stepped into the light. She hears what we don't, he said gently. That's her gift. Outside, the storm softened, snow slowing as if the sky itself exhaled in relief that the truth had been uncovered before danger grew. Aspen shifted closer, resting her head lightly against the edge of the bed as Evelyn's breath grew steadier. Even Jordan paused to watch, struck by the strange harmony between human and animal, between winter and warmth. In the hallway, Mason stood guard as the medical team finalized preparations to contact the nearest hospital. Aspen stayed at the threshold, ears rotating toward every sound inside. And as the soft beep of the monitor pulsed rhythmically, Mason realized something profound. Aspen had not simply sensed distress. She had intervened at the exact moment when a single delay, one flight, 1 hour, one faint, might have led to a far different story. But not today. Not under winter's watch. Winter pressed its weight against Willow Harbor Airport, as though the storm itself had paused to witness what unfolded behind the medical room doors. Outside, snow drifted in lazy spirals, but inside, the air thickened with something quieter, heavier, a tension that lived in breath, in silence, in the fragile lines of a woman fighting dizziness while life fluttered beneath her ribs. In the larger medical suite, the warm light cast soft halos across stainless steel trays and monitors, humming a contemplative rhythm. Evelyn lay back against a slightly elevated bed, one hand resting protectively across her abdomen. Marisol adjusted the blankets around her, with a gentleness uncommon in emergency rooms. Gentleness earned from decades of watching fear bloom in the eyes of patients and learning how to soothe it with steady hands. Jordan Clark typed notes into a tablet, his brows drawn together. He was young, but not inexperienced. 3 winters of EMT work had granted him a blend of scientific focus and emotional intuition. Now, both instincts told him the same thing. Whatever was happening inside Evelyn was not trivial. We need to get a full report ready for the transfer, he murmured. Vascular irregularities, low BP, dizziness episodes. They'll want it all when we call the hospital. Marisol nodded, though her attention remained fixed on Evelyn. How do you feel now? Still a little lightheaded, Evelyn admitted. Like my body's running behind. Like it can't catch up with itself. Marisol nodded, her expression softening. Your symptoms suggest circulation issues. We're going to bring a small team to evaluate next steps. A team, Evelyn repeated, more frightened than surprised. Why? Because we don't want to take chances, Jordan answered, especially not with pregnancy. You're in the right place now. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. She knew he was right, but the room felt too bright, too watchful. Her thoughts flickered to the plane she was supposed to board. She imagined herself collapsing mid-flight, imagined attendants scrambling for help at 30,000 feet. That fragile picture lasted just a moment before she breathed out shakily. Aspen knew, she whispered, before I did. Dogs like her often do, Marisol replied. Some creatures hear the body's distress before the mind even understands. Beyond the door, Aspen stood guard with Mason beside her. The hallway was long and quiet, lit by soft lamps that flickered with each hum of the generator. The storm outside had shifted from urgent to steady, snow falling in feathery curtains. Aspen's ears perked toward every sound, the wheeled carts, muffled footsteps, the shuffling of papers from the triage desk down the hall, but her focus remained locked on one heartbeat inside that room. Mason knelt beside her, laying a steady hand across her shoulders. He could feel the tension there, like coiled winter wind just before it howls. I know, Mason whispered. She's in good hands. They'll take care of her. Aspen pressed her head briefly against his knee, but her gaze never left the door. A passing nurse, Catherine Boone, paused long enough to give the dog a small smile. Catherine was a woman in her early 50s with warm brown skin, hair pinned in a neat bun streaked with gray, and a gentle stoicism that made patients trust her instantly. She carried herself like someone who'd held far too many hands in their final moments, and so she clung fiercely to kindness wherever she found it. "She's a loyal one," Catherine murmured. "Some dogs just know where they're needed most." Mason nodded. "She doesn't get like this often. When she does, I listen." Inside, Marisol prepared Evelyn for transfer authorization, while Jordan checked the monitors again. As he leaned closer, the faintest frown creased his features. "It dipped again," he said softly. "Not dangerously, but not improving as quickly as I'd like." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Is my baby—" "Your baby's heart rate is steady," Marisol reassured. "But your blood pressure is still unstable. The Doppler scan showed lower than normal blood flow to the placenta. That's why you're feeling these symptoms." Evelyn's breath hitched. Is it dangerous?" Jordan hesitated, and that hesitation frightened her more than any outright answer. Marisol stepped in before fear could deepen its roots. "It can be, if untreated, but the good news is that we caught it early." "Aspen caught it," Evelyn whispered. "Then Aspen saved you both?" Marisol replied simply. Meanwhile, Mason's radio crackled softly. "Officer Hale," came a voice from dispatch. "Medical team requesting your presence for patient's family contact assistance." "Copy," Mason replied. He rose, giving Aspen a soft hand signal. She remained seated but alert. Mason stepped into the medical suite, and the moment he entered, Evelyn's worried gaze found him immediately. "Officer Hale," she breathed, a fragile exhale of relief. "Is Aspen okay?" "She's right outside. She hasn't taken her eyes off the door." Evelyn exhaled shakily. "Of course she hasn't." Marisol approached Mason with a folder. "We're arranging transfer to Harborview Hospital. We'll need help ensuring she gets there safely. Weather's making things complicated." "I'll coordinate," Mason said. His voice matched Winter's tone, steady, cool, unwavering. Outside, Aspen rose the moment she sensed movement on the other side of the door. Her tail gave a single slow wag, the kind she used only when acknowledging fragile hope. Mason stepped out again to stand with her. "She's holding on," he whispered. Aspen pressed her head into his palm, grounding them both. Back inside, Evelyn watched Jordan coil the Doppler cable, her voice wavering. "I'm scared." Marisol didn't sugarcoat things. She never had. "Fear means you care, and caring means you'll fight, and right now, you're not fighting alone." Evelyn's eyes brimmed. "I just didn't expect this. I thought I was fine." "People always think they're fine," Jordan said, his tone gentle, "until the body whispers. And today, Aspen heard it for you." The medical team moved quickly. Papers were signed, calls were made, a stretcher was prepared for safe transfer through the icy terminal. Aspen paced once, one short circle, before settling again. It wasn't restlessness, it was readiness. Sarah Wexley, the flight attendant from earlier, spotted the preparations as she passed the corridor. Her eyes widened with concern. "Is she all right?" she whispered to Mason. "She's stable," Mason said, "but needs hospital care." Sarah touched her chest lightly. "I'm glad you two were here, especially her." She nodded at Aspen. As the team prepared to wheel Evelyn out, the door opened, releasing warm air into the cold hallway. Aspen moved forward immediately, but stopped at Mason's quiet command. Obedient, but unwilling to lose sight of the woman she had claimed as her responsibility. Evelyn reached out a trembling hand toward Aspen. "Thank you," she whispered. Aspen dipped her head, amber eyes soft as melting snow. It was then, watching the medical team move around her, watching Aspen stand guard, watching Mason direct and guide, that Evelyn realized something profound. She had been seconds from boarding a plane, seconds from leaving the ground with a condition that could have spiraled into danger miles above the earth. And yet, here she was, held in place by a dog made of winter instincts and unwavering loyalty. Marisol placed a hand on Evelyn's arm. "We're taking you to the hospital. Nothing more we can do here until they run further tests." Evelyn nodded, breath trembling. "Okay." As they wheeled her down the hallway, Aspen walked beside Mason, muscles taut but controlled. Every footstep resonated with purpose. Every breath carried the unspoken truth. Something dangerous had been moving silently beneath the surface, but now it was seen, named, and confronted. And winter, drifting gently outside the airport windows, seemed to pause its fall, as though relieved the danger had finally stepped out of the shadows and into the light. The storm outside Willow Harbor Airport pressed quietly against the windows as dusk approached, dimming the edges of the terminal like a lantern running low on oil. What had begun as a restless morning now deepened into a solemn early evening, the kind winter reserved for moments when truth needed stillness to be heard. Snow fell in thin, wavering sheets, less frantic now, almost contemplative, while inside the medical suite, the soft hum of machinery wove through the air like a second heartbeat. Evelyn lay on the wider medical bed, the sterile paper crinkling lightly beneath her. Her breath was steadier than before, but worry pooled behind her eyes, dark and crystalline as winter water. Jordan stood beside the Doppler monitor, his posture alert but respectful, while Marisol leaned closer to study the patterns shifting across the screen. The tiny pulses of sound, amplified by technology, filled the room with a rhythmic whisper that felt both fragile and ancient. The door opened and Dr. Samuel Lerner entered, a man in his mid-40s with the calm presence of someone who had spent half his life holding the line between danger and safety. He was tall, with salt-gray hair swept back neatly, deep-set blue eyes that seemed to see past panic and into the machinery of the human body. His shoulders carried the quiet weight of a physician who had delivered miracles and sorrow in equal measure. A faint scar traced along his left jaw, a souvenir from a car accident during his residency that had changed not his confidence, but his urgency to save every life he could reach in time. He had been called in because Evelyn's case was too delicate, too layered to be left solely to the airport team. "Mason," Dr. Lerner greeted as he stepped inside. "Jordan, Marisol." His voice was low, steady as winter stone. Then his gaze softened as it fell on Evelyn. "Ms. Ward, I'm Dr. Lerner. I've been briefed on what's happening. How are you feeling?" "A little better," Evelyn murmured. "Just tired, lightheaded, and scared." "That's natural," he said, pulling up a stool beside the bed. "Let's take this one step at a time." Aspen stood in the doorway, not inside, but close enough that her presence filled the room like a silent oath. Her amber eyes followed every shift of Evelyn's breath, every tightening of Mason's jaw, every flicker on the screen. She seemed carved from the dusk itself, attentive, unwavering, listening not to words, but to the invisible signature of distress she had sensed long before machines confirmed it. Dr. Lerner studied the Doppler images for several long seconds. The room stilled around his concentration. Evelyn's fingers dug slightly into the blanket as she watched his eyes scan the patterns. Slowed waves, reduced flow, the subtle dips that told a story she couldn't fully understand. Finally, he spoke. "What Aspen picked up from you," he began, glancing briefly at the waiting dog, "is something very real, and something many humans would miss." "Is it the baby?" Evelyn whispered. "Indirectly," Dr. Lerner replied. "The issue is you, Ms. Ward. Your blood pressure is significantly lower than it should be, and the Doppler scan is showing reduced uteroplacental blood flow. That means the blood reaching your baby is limited." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Is that common?" "It can happen," he answered gently, "and it often presents subtly. Dizziness, shortness of breath, sudden fatigue. Many expectant mothers mistake it for normal pregnancy symptoms. You likely would have too." She swallowed hard. If I had boarded my flight, there is a real chance you would have fainted midair," he said frankly yet kindly. "Cabin pressure, altitude, and reduced oxygen could have caused your blood pressure to drop further. At that point, you might have gone into medical distress, and your baby would have been at risk." Evelyn's eyes glistened with tears, not loud tears, quiet ones, the kind that shimmer before falling. Dr. Lerner rested a steady hand on her forearm. "But you are here, and that changes everything." Mason exhaled softly, his shoulders easing just enough for Aspen to sense the shift. She leaned lightly into his leg, grounding him the way she always did when unspoken tension cracked open. "How serious is it now?" Evelyn asked, voice trembling. Dr. Lerner nodded to Marisol, who brought up the most recent measurements. He explained, "It's not critical at this moment, but it is absolutely not something we take lightly." The reduced blood flow could indicate a developing clot or a temporary vascular constriction. We won't know for certain until we run additional hospital-level imaging. So, the baby, Evelyn said, is still stable, Dr. Lerner assured her. Your little one is strong, but your body is telling us it needs help to maintain that stability. Winter seemed to lean closer against the windows, as though listening. I want to be very clear, Ms. Ward, the doctor continued. Aspen's reaction was not a fluke. Dogs trained at her level can detect hormonal shifts, stress chemistry, changes in oxygenation. What she sensed was your body beginning to compensate for restricted blood flow. He paused, letting that truth settle gently. In many ways, he finished, she saved you precious time. Evelyn covered her mouth with her hand, releasing a soft, broken sound, half sob, half gratitude. She saved us, she whispered. Me and the baby? Aspen responded with one soft, rumbling exhale, half sigh, half affirmation. But Dr. Lerner wasn't done. We're going to start you on IV fluids, he said, signaling Jordan. We need to elevate your blood pressure gradually. This is not something we rush. The point is stability, not speed. And the transfer? Marisol asked. We'll proceed once she stabilizes, he replied. Harborview has neonatal specialists who can monitor the baby more closely. As Jordan inserted the IV and began the slow flow of fluids, Evelyn winced lightly but didn't look away from the monitor. Watching the numbers felt like watching the shape of her future, uncertain but still beat by beat alive. During the next half hour, the room's tension softened. The hum of the IV pump grew steady, mechanical yet comforting. Marisol checked Evelyn's pressure again. It's rising, she said, offering a small smile. Not fast, but steadily. Relief washed over Evelyn's features like sunlight flickering across snow. Dr. Lerner returned, reviewing the updated numbers. Good, much better. You're responding well to treatment. Can she see Aspen? Mason asked quietly. Dr. Lerner considered, then nodded. Just for a few minutes. I think it'll help her stabilize emotionally as well. Mason gave Aspen the soft hand signal. Aspen rose instantly and trotted forward, stepping into the room like a silent guardian. She approached Evelyn's bedside, lowering her head slowly until her muzzle rested at the edge of the mattress. Her amber eyes softened, warm and certain. Evelyn reached out with trembling fingers and rested them on Aspen's fur. The dog closed her eyes, leaning just slightly into the touch, an intimate acknowledgement, both ancient and wordless. You saved us, Evelyn whispered again. I don't know how you did it, but you did. Aspen didn't wag her tail wildly. She didn't bark. She simply breathed out, long and low, a sound like winter releasing its grip. Dr. Lerner watched the exchange quietly as he updated notes. Human medicine has limits, he murmured, almost to himself. But instinct is something extraordinary. The IV continued dripping. The storm outside finally began to soften, and inside that small medical room, surrounded by machines and winter shadows, a difficult truth had become visible and survivable. Evelyn was safe. Her baby was safe. And Aspen, quiet sentinel of the storm, had proved once again that there were realms of danger only a loyal creature could hear before anyone else. Night settled slowly over Willow Harbor Airport, drawing long shadows across the polished floors, as if winter itself were stretching after a long day of worry. The storm that had blotted the sky since morning finally began to thin. The snowflakes drifting past the tall glass windows were fewer now, gentler, slower, as though even the sky exhaled in relief. The lights along the runway flickered against the dissolving snowfall, stretching like soft golden threads across the quiet white world outside. It felt as though the chaos of the day, the urgency, the uncertainty, had retreated step by step, giving way to something calmer, something luminous. Inside the medical suite, everything had softened. The IV pump continued its quiet, steady pulse. Evelyn lay against her pillows, her face pale but no longer drained. Her breathing, though slow, had steadied into a rhythm that no longer shook with fear. The faint color returning to her cheeks seemed to warm the room more than the heater itself. Aspen remained close, never intrusive, never disruptive, but present in that ancient grounding way only loyal animals could be. She sat beside the bed, her thick gray coat catching the glow of the overhead lights, her eyes warm and alert. She watched Evelyn as though monitoring the rise and fall of each breath. She watched the room, the hallway, the door. She watched everything. Mason Hale leaned against the far counter, arms crossed loosely, observing the quiet scene unfold. He had seen countless emergencies in his life: injuries, panic attacks, cardiac events, dehydration collapses. But something about this one struck deeper, brushing against a place inside him that still remembered the sting of winters past. Maybe it was because Evelyn was young and gentle and had walked into the airport with no idea that her body was quietly faltering. Maybe it was the unborn child, fragile, unseen, whose fate had balanced on a thread so thin no human could have detected its fraying. Or maybe it was Aspen, who had chosen a stranger and refused to look away. Dr. Lerner re-entered the room with a clipboard in hand, scanning Evelyn's newest readings. He nodded with quiet satisfaction. "Your pressure is up," he said warmly. "Still lower than ideal, but stable. And your baby's responding well to that. You're out of immediate danger." Evelyn released a breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. Tears pooled at the corners of her eyes, not the sharp, frightened kind she had felt earlier, but soft ones, trembling with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." Jordan, standing at the foot of the bed, smiled gently. "You did the hard part, staying awake, listening to your body." "Listening to a dog," Evelyn corrected, glancing down at Aspen. Dr. Lerner chuckled softly. "Sometimes they know before we do. Actually, most of the time they do." Aspen lifted her head at the sound of her name, offering a small, contained wag, as if humility were part of her training. Evelyn reached out and placed her hand on Aspen's head again, running her fingers behind the dog's ears. Aspen leaned gently into the touch, her breath quiet and warm against the blankets. Her eyes softened further, lids lowering as though she were finally allowing herself to relax, even if only slightly. Outside the windows, the last flurries of snow fell like feathers drifting off a great white wing. The storm was letting go. The airport lights glimmered across the settling quiet, and through the glass, the world seemed washed clean. Mason approached the bedside, stepping softly so as not to disturb the peace of the moment. "You gave us a scare," he said gently. "So I've heard," Evelyn answered, a wry but tired smile touching her lips. "I really didn't think it was anything serious. I didn't want to bother anyone." Mason shook his head. "You didn't bother anyone, and Aspen didn't alert out of obligation. She alerted because something was wrong." Evelyn looked at Aspen again. How could she possibly know? Mason lowered himself into the nearest chair. "She picks up things we don't. Hormone changes, blood chemistry shifts, stress patterns and breathing. It's instinct, but it's also training. She heard your body quieting down before you did." "And before it was too late," Evelyn murmured. The room settled into a soft, reverent silence. Dr. Lerner closed his folder. "Ambulance will be ready for transport soon, but for now, you can rest. You're in no danger as long as we monitor you. And the baby," he smiled, "is a fighter." Evelyn pressed her lips together, emotion shimmering. "I didn't know. I had no idea I was that close to something dangerous." Jordan stepped forward. "That's how it often is. The quiet problems are the hardest to see." Mason nodded slowly. "But they're the ones Aspen always hears." Evelyn reached for Mason's hand with her free one, squeezing with surprising strength for someone whose body had been fighting low blood pressure for hours. "Thank you," she said. "If I had gotten on that plane—" "You didn't," Mason replied softly. "You're here, and you're safe." Aspen suddenly perked up, ears flicking. She stepped closer to Evelyn and let out a short, gentle bark. One single note. Not an alert, not a warning. Just a simple sound full of warmth, like a small lantern glowing inside a cavern. Everyone smiled. "That," Mason said, rubbing Aspen's neck, "is her way of saying the crisis has passed." Evelyn laughed, thin, shaky, but genuine. "I'll take her word for it." Aspen lay down then, stretching one paw forward, resting her chin atop it. For the first time all day, her body finally shifted from vigilance to peace. The tension melted from her shoulders, her breath slow and content. Mason watched her with a softened expression. There was a kind of reverence in his gaze, reverence for her instincts, her devotion, her ability to read what no instrument or human eye could. He had seen her save people before, guide rescues, detect invisible dangers. But today felt different. Today felt close, personal. A reminder that in a world overflowing with technology and machines and systems, some lives were saved by something older, something wild, something profoundly loyal. The storm outside stopped completely. The snow stilled across the world like a held breath. The quiet evening light pooled through the windows, illuminating Evelyn's bed, Aspen's resting form, and Mason's steady presence. Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief moment, overwhelmed but grateful. "I'll never forget this," she whispered. "Never." "You won't have to," Mason replied. "Aspen won't let you." Aspen lifted her head, just enough to offer a soft huff of agreement. Outside, the runway lights shimmered. Travelers resumed their journeys. The airport returned to its everyday rhythm. But here, in this small room warmed by IV pumps and human relief, a truth settled like the final snowflake of the storm. Not every life is saved by skill or machines or medicine. Some are saved by instinct, some by loyalty, some by a creature who listens to the quietest secrets the body whispers. And on this winter night in Willow Harbor, 2 lives were safe because Aspen had heard. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder or bright light. Sometimes they come quietly through a loyal dog who refuses to look away, through a stranger who chooses compassion, or through the strength God places in our hearts when we think we have none left. In our everyday lives, we face worries and hidden battles that no one else can see. Yet God watches over us in ways we may never fully understand. He sends help at the right moment, through the right people, and even through faithful animals who hear the whispers we miss. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what you believe, and remember to subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and love. May God bless you and your family with peace and protection wherever you are. And if you believe in the quiet miracles He sends, type Amen in the comments.